Well, I tell you what, I wanna dig into how you work together, how everybody gets involved. But probably the best way to talk about that is to talk about your series. So, if you would please give esteemed, I don't summarize other people's biographies, and I don't make you sitting through me summarizing your book. How painful for you that would be. If you would tell the esteemed audience all about your series.
Okay, the first book, The Wind Reader, is about the central character is named Donover, and he's one of three. He's marooned in a city far from home through no fault of his own. And so he's living on the streets with two other kids, so he's the main character, and his pals are Jarka and Dilly, and he's pretending to be able to tell fortunes in order to earn enough to eat with. And he accidentally tells a true fortune for the prince, who takes him into the castle to be the royal fortune teller. So the good news is there's food and a warm bed, but the bad news is he can't tell fortunes. And they're worried about an assassination plot, so things get tense. So that's that. But at the end of the book, everything is solved, and he goes home, and Dilly goes home, and it's just Jarka left in the city. So the second book is about Jarka. The Wise Man is about Jarka. Jarka was born with a crooked foot, what we would call a club foot. And in the world of the book, the gods never take anything away without giving something back, getting a gift back. So for Jarka, the gift is wind reading. That is, he can read the wind to tell what the people's secrets are being carried along on the wind. So he's now in the castle where Donover no longer is. He's in the castle training to be an advisor for the king because he has this power. And street kids start disappearing. And as a former street kid himself, he's very concerned about these kids. He's kind of been keeping track of them. And he decides he's going to hunt down who is taking them. And the king tells him to back off, which is also a fairly suspicious thing from his point of view, right? So that's essentially what the book is him trying to figure out who is grabbing these kids and to protect them. So I would say, and there's a third book, the one about Dilly will be next year. Third member of the first trio. So
I find it sort of amusing just how unstartled, I guess, or how unbothered so many characters were by the disappearing of street kids. Like, yeah, it's fine. These things happen.
Yeah, that's right. Well, actually, street kids out there are street kids disappearing right now. When you think about from the streets of Chicago, which is where I live. So, yeah, strays. They're strays. They don't belong to anybody.
Well, Sara, you're the editor. How did that description of the series go, you think? Any improvements you would make?
Never. Yeah, that's a pretty good description of the series, I think. I think in terms of the themes for this series, the things that really caught my attention about it is the ability for people who are in really, really tough, often dire situations to care about each other. And we see, and even care about people they don't necessarily know very much, and to, come together to do the right thing, even when it's difficult, which, in today's world is an incredibly important motif, I think.
So who's the ideal reader for this young adult novel?
It's nominally young adult, and I think it crosses over, but I think it crosses over for an adult reader fairly well. But actually, I think that's true of a lot of science fiction and fantasy. I think that the line between young adult and adult readership in science fiction and fantasy has always been one that was crossed pretty frequently. An editor of Source Books, which is a publisher here in Chicago, spoke to my writer group here, and he said they had been debating internally what constituted young adult fantasy because it was hard to classify some of these books. And he said that they finally concluded that it was books about young characters. It was fantasies about young characters, period, and that everything else that gets associated with that is basically a marketing move. Where do you put it in the store? That's a marketing move. You know, what do you call it? That's a marketing move. Which I thought that was an interesting insight from him.
And Sarah, do you, having marketed the book and planning on where to put it before, do you have an ideal reader that you're targeting with marketing, or who are you reaching out for to get the good news of this series in their hands?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because Dorothy rightly said, young adult does not just mean that, you know, young adults are going to read it. In fact, I read a few months ago that actually the biggest readership for young adult books are women between the ages of 20 and 35. So was fascinating for me to kind of learn about that, but it does kind of make sense, you know. And the other thing, of course, is from a business perspective, not necessarily who's wanting to read the books, but who's buying the books. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily about, you know, trying to get the books on websites that kids necessarily look at or young adults necessarily look at. Although obviously that's a big thing as well with, you know, influencers, and I mentioned earlier about the importance of bloggers and booktubers, etc. But also websites where there are parents looking for great books for their kids as well, whether that's young teenagers or you know, looking for birthday gift ideas, for example. So there's a big crossover.